I'm Steve Johnson, Farm Management Specialist with Iowa State University Extension and Outreach. Forward contracts are defined as an agreement between a buyer and a seller covering a quantity and quality of bushels to be delivered at a specified location and time in exchange for a specific price. Forward contracts are very commonly used by corn and soybean farmers. In our example today, let's use a 5,000 bushel of number 2 yellow corn that will be delivered to a local co-op in the last half of February. So basically, we know the price, we know at delivery the price will be 30 under or a 30 under basis under the March corn futures, and it closed at $4 per bushel. So today I could call my local co-op, find out that March corn closed at $4 and that they're bidding 30 under for last half February delivery. Again, it's a binding transaction between the seller and the buyer for a delivery date, and that delivery date in our example was last half February. The conditions are set, including the quantity of bushels, the quality of the bushels, number 2 yellow corn, the delivery time last half February, as well as the cash price, $3.70 in our example. We know the futures price, we know the basis, so therefore we know the cash price of a forward cash contract. Forward cash contracts are often used and sets the cash price and delivery terms, so it does require the delivery of bushels to a specific location and a specific date and a specific quality. Again, they're available for both new and old crop, corn and soybeans. It doesn't require a margin deposit. It doesn't require a premium. In fact, you're working with your grain merchandiser when you're doing forward cash contracts. Forward cash contracts have the advantages of no margin deposit. You lock in the price and the delivery terms, but the cash price can't go lower. So you've locked in at $3.70 a bushel in our earlier examples. But there are also disadvantages. The penalties if you cannot deliver the contracted bushels. Again, it's a binding contract between you and the local grain merchandiser. Cash price can't go higher because you've locked in on the cash price as long as you meet the obligations of the contract. But in many cases, you might not receive the best basis. The basis that's actually offered as we get closer to that delivery period could be more attractive, isn't always, but that's why we see a very similar tool offered that we call Hedge to Arrive. Hedge to Arrive are a forward cash contract with but one different caveat. They're very similar. It's a binding transaction with a delivery date, location, the amount of bushels to deliver, as well as the quality of bushels. But when a farmer says, I want to do a hedge to arrive, the likely difference is the basis is not typically set when the transaction is initiated. So in May, when a farmer does a HTA to the local co-op for harvest delivery, typically the futures price is established, but likely not the basis. Therefore, when we look at a hedge to arrive contract, the seller of the grain usually sets the basis prior to the actual delivery of the grain. So when the initiation of the contract takes place, the quantity, quality, delivery period, location is known, but the cash price isn't known since the basis is not yet established. The basis will likely be established prior to delivery. When we look at the crop marketing matrix used throughout the video series, we see both the cash forward contract as well as the hedge to arrive contract. We're using those tools when our expected change is futures price moving down. But if we expect the basis to weaken, we're locking in basis using a forward cash contract. But if we expect that the basis will strengthen, become less negative, we're likely using a non-roll hedge to arrive. Non-roll. We're not rolling that contract to a different crop marketing year. We're using that same period of harvest until late August as the period of time whereby we're using forward cash contracts and HTAs for both old and new crop bushels. What might be some key points? Forward cash contracts as well as HTAs are between the seller and buyer for a later delivery date of that grain. So usually you're working with your local grain merchandiser when you initiate a forward cash contract or an HTA. The primary difference is that of the basis. It's typically not set on an HTA contract when the contract is initiated, but if we're using a forward cash contract, we likely have already established the basis, therefore the cash price. So the seller usually sets the basis prior to delivery of the grain on an HTA contract. I'm Steve Johnson, Iowa State University Extension and Outreach.